The Supreme Court rejected a challenge to its landmark ruling that requires all states to grant licenses for same-sex marriages. And more on the court's decision on mail-in ballots. The government will soon reopen after several Democrats joined Republicans on a bipartisan deal. It got just enough votes to advance and will now go back to the House for approval on minor changes. President Trump is asking air traffic controllers to return to work amid ongoing flight cancellations. The president is offering $10,000 for controllers who didn't stop working despite the government shutdown. President Trump hosts Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara at the White House today, marking the first visit by a Syrian leader to Washington.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Monday, November 10th. I'm Stephanie Cox. The Supreme Court today is rejecting calls to overturn its landmark 2015 decision that legalized same-sex marriage nationwide. The justices declined to hear an appeal from Kim Davis, the former Kentucky court clerk, who refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. In turning away same-sex couples, Davis said her faith prevented her from complying with the high court ruling. A federal judge jailed her for contempt of court in September 2015. She was released after her staff issued licenses on her behalf. 3 current justices dissented from the 2015 decision, including Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Chief Justice John Roberts. The Supreme Court agreed to look at an election case that could determine the future of mail-in ballots received after Election Day. The case involves Mississippi and the Republican National Committee. Mississippi wants to keep its own election practices. The Republican National Committee says federal law bars counting mail-in ballots that arrive after Election Day. The Supreme Court's determination could affect other states that allow mail-in votes after Election Day. President Trump has said mail-in ballots allow for election fraud. He posted months ago on Truth Social that the practice should be altogether canceled. He said exceptions could remain for overseas military and very ill people. He said he could use an executive order to achieve it. An end to the 41-day government shutdown is now in sight. On Capitol Hill late last night, a handful of Democrats voted with Republicans on a plan to reopen the government. There's still a few more steps before it takes effect, but it's a promising breakthrough. House Speaker Mike Johnson said this morning the House should vote as soon as possible. NTD's Melina Weiskup reports.
At the very moment that they do that final vote, I will call all House members to return to Washington as quickly as possible. We'll give a 36-hour formal and official notice so that we can vote as soon as possible to pass the amended CR bill and get it to the president's desk. I'm stating the obvious to all my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats in the House. You need to begin right now returning to the Hill. We have to do this as quickly as possible.
Late Sunday night, senators broke a lengthy stalemate over government funding. 8 Democrats joined Republicans to advance a bill that will reopen the government after 40 days shut down.
Now, I understand that not all of my Democratic colleagues are satisfied with this agreement, but waiting another week or another month wouldn't deliver a better outcome. It would only
Part of the deal will require Republican leadership to hold a December vote on extending Obamacare subsidies. The vote may or may not pass due to lack of Republican support.
As everybody here knows, that is a totally meaningless gesture. You can get 100 votes here in the Senate. Won't mean anything because the House is not going to take it up.
Republican leaders in both chambers have said that the bipartisan negotiations will continue as they work out a new deal on Obamacare reforms.
These senators are not interested in political games. They're interested in finding real ways to address health care costs for American families. We also have a president who is willing to sit down and get to work on this issue.
Without a guaranteed outcome, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer did not support the deal to reopen the government. Last night's vote was the first step towards reopening. Senators will now attach a new bill to fully fund a few non-controversial aspects of government: military construction, Veterans Affairs, the Department of Agriculture, and the legislative branch. It also includes a stopgap measure to fund the rest of the government through January 30th. House lawmakers will return to Washington this week after nearly 2 months. The new bill is expected to easily pass the lower chamber. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Global shares rose today. Investors were optimistic after the Senate moved forward with a measure to reopen the government. Wall Street's main indexes opened higher this morning. The S&P 500 gained 1%, while Nasdaq advanced 1.6%. The Dow Jones climbed 250 points, or 0.5%. Here's more on the market reactions.
Sunday's breakthrough helped push Nasdaq futures up over 1.2%. Asian markets were up Monday after the open. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan rose 1.36%, and Japan's Nikkei was up a similar amount, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index jumped 1.5%. The positive trend spread to Europe, where shares were also up. The Pan-European Stock 600 climbed 1.1% in early trade. The shutdown has taken a growing toll on the US economy. Federal workers from airports to law enforcement and the military have gone unpaid, while the central bank deals with limited government reporting of economic data. White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett warned the country's fourth quarter GDP could be negative if the shutdown dragged on.
Republican Governor Greg Abbott of Texas says he plans to run for re-election. Abbott will seek his fourth term next year. The 67-year-old made his announcement at a golf course in Houston yesterday. He described the state as the heartbeat of America and said the Texas economy was growing twice as fast as the U.S. economy. Abbott has been a staunch supporter of President Trump and has supported his immigration enforcement operations. The FDA is taking steps to remove its highest type of warning for many hormone treatments for women with menopause symptoms. Today, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. called this a new era in women's health.
For more than 2 decades, the American medical establishment turned its back on women. Millions of women were told to fear the very therapy that could have given them strength, peace, and dignity through one of life's most difficult transitions, menopause. That ends today. The FDA is initiating the removal of a broad black box warnings from hormone replacement therapy products for menopause.
The black box warning is the strongest alert the FDA can require. Hormone therapy has been on the market for a long time, but prescriptions plummeted in 2003 when the warnings were added. The labels warn menopause treatments that can contain estrogen can increase the risk of uterine and breast cancers and blood clots. The black box, or boxed warning, was added after a large study found some higher health risks for women taking estrogen or estrogen pills after menopause. More recent analyses have shown hormone therapy started within 10 years of starting menopause can safely help manage menopausal symptoms. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is now holding a news conference as the U.S. government shutdown enters its 41st day, but with light at the end of the tunnel in sight. Let's tune in.
Experience dramatically increased health care costs. In some cases, their health insurance premiums will increase by $1,000 or $2,000 per year. That is unacceptable. It will be unaffordable for working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans to be able to go see a doctor when they need one. And so House Democrats and Senate Democrats have been fighting hard to address the Republican health care crisis and to lower the high cost of living for everyday Americans in the United States of America. Because the reality is, America is too expensive. And far too many people are struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. They can't thrive, they can barely survive. And that's why Democrats have been waging this fight. And we'll continue to wage this fight. No matter what comes over to us from the United States Senate to the House of Representatives at some point this week. Our position as House Democrats has been crystal clear. We will sit down with any Republicans, anytime, any place, anywhere, in order to find a bipartisan path forward, but we're not down with their my way or the highway approach to governance. That's failed the American people. It's been a disaster for the American people, and the American people know it, which is why last Tuesday, Republicans all across the country got wiped out. One of the most decisive off-year elections ever in modern American history. And so as House Democrats, we know we're on the right side of this fight, the right side of the American people. And we're not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of the American people. And we're going to continue the fight to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And if it doesn't happen this week, next week, this month, next month, then it's the fault of Donald Trump, House and Senate Republicans, who continue to make life more expensive for the American people. Questions?
Some Democrats in your own caucus are suggesting Schumer is ineffective as Senate Democratic leader and should be replaced.
Hakeem Jeffries there speaking about the Affordable Care Act and his plans for his party to negotiate further with the Republicans once the government opens. Next, air travel across the United States is in turmoil as the government shutdown triggers massive flight cancellations and delays. According to flight tracking website FlightAware, more than 1,600 flights have been canceled so far today, with another 3,300 delayed. More than 2,700 flights were canceled yesterday and over 10,000 delayed, marking the worst day of travel disruption since the shutdown began. The FAA continues to grapple with severe staffing shortages in air traffic control towers across the nation. Delta Airlines has been particularly hard hit, canceling or delaying more than half of its mainline flights. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy said earlier the FAA would not cut any international flights as it would be a violation of international agreements. Here's a Southwest airline pilot urging passengers yesterday to call their senators. Watch.
I don't really care what your political persuasion is, but you should really call your senator. Because I'll tell you, this is costing the airlines millions of dollars. And just think of 30 airplanes with one engine running. And it's going to take us at least 90 minutes to take off. So right now we're at a 4% reduction in flight capacity. Next week we go to 10. Last night I had a 6-hour delay in Houston, and the weather was perfect. It's because the air traffic controllers aren't getting paid.
As flight cancellations continue, President Trump is asking air traffic controllers to return to work today. Government-directed flight cuts and air traffic staffing absences continue to affect U.S. air travel. Trump says all air traffic controllers must get back to work, adding that he will be recommending a bonus of $10,000 per person for those who didn't stop working during the government shutdown. The president says the people who didn't work during the shutdown did a disservice to their country. He added that workers would have gotten paid despite the issues in Congress. And an influx of cash could be headed to millions of Americans. President Trump announced plans yesterday to offer $2,000 payments funded by tariff revenue to people outside high-income brackets. Trump wrote on social media that the U.S. is taking in trillions of dollars and will soon begin paying down what he called the nation's enormous debt. He also highlighted what he described as record investment in new plants and factories nationwide. The plan would likely require congressional approval. Trump first raised the idea of a $2,000 tariff-funded dividend in early October. His latest announcement came just days after the Supreme Court heard arguments on the legality of his global tariff strategy. The president also said today that all leftover tariff revenue after $2,000 checks will be used to pay down the national debt. And a federal appeals court has upheld an order requiring the Trump administration to fully fund November SNAP benefits. The First Circuit declined to pause a Rhode Island judge's ruling directing the USDA to use $4 billion, originally designated for other purposes, to ensure full food aid payments. But the decision has no immediate effect. The Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson has placed a temporary hold on the lower court order. It will remain in place for 48 hours after the appeals court's actions. And this morning, the Trump administration returned to the Supreme Court in a push to keep full SNAP payments. Over the weekend, USDA instructed states to reverse any efforts to issue full SNAP benefits before Jackson's hold or risk financial penalties. The administration maintains that only Congress can authorize new spending and blames lawmakers for the crisis. President Trump has pardoned a number of prominent figures involved in challenging the 2020 election outcome, including Rudy Giuliani. U.S. pardon attorney Ed Martin shared a proclamation document yesterday on social media. It named more than 70 people, including Sidney Powell, John Eastman, and Mark Meadows. The pardons apply to conduct tied to the individual's involvement in activities surrounding the 2020 presidential election. It also includes any conduct related to, quote, their efforts to expose voting fraud and vulnerabilities in the 2020 presidential election. The document also states, quote, this proclamation ends a grave national injustice perpetrated upon the American people following the 2020 presidential election and continues the process of national reconciliation. The proclamation also states the pardon does not apply to Trump himself. And the president is hosting Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara at the White House today. It's the first visit by a Syrian leader to Washington. The meeting comes 6 months after Trump and Shara met in Saudi Arabia. Shara was seen playing basketball yesterday in Washington, D.C. The Syrian leader took office in December 2024 after the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. Last December, the United States dropped a $10 million counter-terror bounty against Shara. A now deleted bounty notice against Shara notes his role in founding the Nusra Front and leading the group through its reorganization into HTS. The bounty notice further stated that the group had taken part in kidnappings and killings in Syria over the years, including the 2015 slayings of 20 Druze villagers. The United States revoked the designation of HTS as a foreign terrorist group in July. And the nation marks the 250th birthday of the United States Marine Corps today. At the Marine Corps Birthday Ball in Washington yesterday, Vice President J.D. Vance, himself a Marine veteran, praised the Corps' enduring strength.
The United States Marine Corps is the greatest weapon the political leadership of this country has, and when you hear this phrase, peace through strength, we are fighting for peace every single day in the White House, every single day in the Oval Office. We achieve peace because you, the Marine Corps, are our strength, and we won't forget it, and we never have. Thank you, Marines.
On November 10th, 1775, John Adams drafted a resolution that created what was then known as the Continental Marines. Across the country today, communities are honoring 250 years of service with parades, flyovers, and special tributes to Marines past and present. Currently, there are more than 200,000 active duty and reserve Marines serving in the United States. Vance told the crowd yesterday the Marine Corps remains the heart of America's military strength, and he promised troops would always be sent into battle with clear purpose and full support. And joining us now to observe and reflect on the Marine Corps' 250th anniversary is U.S. Navy veteran Michael Groman, a board member of the Big Country Veterans. Michael, welcome, and thank you so much for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here.
Excellent. So first off, Michael, what does this day mean to you?
Today's for me a day of remembrance. I was able to, through my Navy career, spend 16 years specifically with the Marine Corps, and then my last 10 years with Joint Commands. So having that opportunity to work with some of these individuals, and I think today we celebrate, 249 years of courage, discipline, and that unwavering spirit of the American warrior. And, you know, that'll continue into the future and looking to be a part of it in any way possible.
Certainly, the celebrations continue, and there's a big one coming up next year. Could you talk to us about the Marine Corps' responsibility and its mission?
Absolutely. You know, the Marine Corps, I think the best ideology or best example I heard was they're kind of America's 911 force. You know, every Marine is a rifleman. That's why the Marine Corps uses or leverages the Navy for some of its special purposes like medical, religious personnel, because the Marine Corps is really trained to fight wars. Everyone is trained to be a rifleman first, and then they'll have a secondary MOS, but when the time needs, the Marine Corps comes together and fights for this country. And when they fight relentlessly. It was an honor to serve next to them in combat, as well as through peacetime.
And perhaps everyone has seen the Marine slogan in ads, the few, the proud. What is the size of the Marine Corps?
So I think the current number today is just over 200,000 active duty and reserves. They're probably one of the, I don't track the numbers as often as I should. Obviously, when I was active duty, I did a little more. But I think they're the, you know, one of the services that has grown the least because they stick to that warrior ethos spirit where they don't have a bunch of ancillary services that they continue to add in, creating more of an administrative burden. They really focus on that lean, deployable fighting concept.
Now, I'd like to dig in some more into this particular branch of the military. How is the Marines structured?
So the Marine Corps, and I think all my Marine buddies are going to get mad at me today. So the Marine Corps is actually a department of the Navy. They don't like to admit that, but it's interesting because if you look at the flags, their flag is actually to the left of the Navy flag because they are considered the senior service, but that all has to do with some administrative filing. But they are a department of the Navy, and they're really designed to fight our wars from an amphibious perspective. So as I think a lot of my buddies would say, the Navy gives them a ride so they can go fight. And that's kind of what their mission has been throughout the history. If you think back to Iwo Jima, Guadalcanal, the amphibious landings, the Marines were kind of the spearhead taking the country into those battles.
All right, let's look at this further. Navy versus Marines. What are the key differences, and what's your message to America on this special day?
So, you know, we are one team, one fight. And I know individually, we always have that rivalry between each other, Navy versus Marine Corps. But at the end of the day, it's a unique brotherhood. It's two components, two services coming together to execute the mission of the United States of America, and that's defend our freedom against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I couldn't have been prouder to serve with the Marine Corps Navy team.
And how has your service changed you, and what's your experience personally been like?
For me, it's really about the ethos that I took away. I entered to the military very young. I was introduced to the Marine Corps at a very young age. The amount of discipline and cohesion that the Marine Corps instilled on me as a young sailor really formed my leadership theories and principles that I kind of carried throughout the rest of my career. I firmly believe that that initial exposure to the Marine Corps is what established my initial core fundamental beliefs in what leadership should look like, and that made me extremely successful for the rest of my career.
And obviously it's a massive process to go through and acquire those lessons, but if you could impart some of them on, say, the future generation or those looking to potentially join the military, what kinds of lessons do you think have been the most valuable?
You know, at the end of the day, what I think most service members have to understand is it's selfless service. It's no longer about you. It's about the people to your left and to the right. Regardless of where they come from, who they are, everyone has raised that right hand and sworn an oath to this country. And that's what it's about. So when you step into the military, those independent ideas are kind of gone, and you need to adopt that culture and the tradition of the service that you've decided to serve, because that's what everybody's doing, is coming together united to fight for this country.
for a united America. Thank you so much, Michael Groman. Good to have you with us today, and thank you so much for your service again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
And Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady USHA Vance visited military personnel undergoing therapy one day before Veterans Day. The couple visited the Military Advanced Training Center at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. They can be seen in the video here, speaking with those undergoing recovery programs and talking with staff about the technology used at the center, including prosthetics use, training. Staff and patients speaking about the various recovery programs offered, both aimed at countering the physical and mental trauma some have experienced in military service. The facility is designed to offer recovering service members the latest technology to help them heal. Vance himself, as you've heard, is a military veteran. Now, thousands attended the National Veterans Parade in the nation's capital over the weekend, honoring the courage and sacrifice those serving in uniform gave to our country. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has that story.
America. Here in the nation's capital, we celebrate veterans here at this parade with the Grand Marshal General Michael Flynn and many people paying tribute to veterans here around the world.
This is the National Veterans Parade Foundation that's putting on the only nationally recognized veterans parade in the country. Despite the government shutdown, this parade is going on without a penny from the U.S. government. And you can see that beautiful flag up there. So that's the fire department of Washington, D.C. that did this for us, and they're just wonderful, wonderful people.
This is the third annual National Veterans Parade, held right in front of the National Archives on Sunday, filled with veterans groups and marching bands. And it's taking place despite the government shutdown, with the help of grassroots support from private donations and sponsors.
Yeah, so I'm actually the daughter of a veteran, come from a long line of veterans, and so getting to spend days like this where we all come together and we acknowledge that service and that sacrifice that so many gave.
They have kept peace for 250 years. And it will be another 250 years for our next generation.
We are able to walk in the streets free today because of people like that.
I think it's very important that we celebrate those who have fought for us and just come together as a community. It's so incredible to see the way that they selflessly give their lives to serve our country. We're protecting our nation's heroes by honoring them today. And I think
the event highlighted veterans facing suicide when they come home from service.
I think there's a misconception so often that they are some of the strongest and they have to remain that. But asking for help does not make you weak. Asking for help proves how strong you are.
Honoring them with the Spartan Pledge.
And what the Spartan Pledge is, it's a promise that us veterans or first responders, they make to one another for that they won't take their own life, they won't commit suicide, because as people know, we lose over 22 vets a day to suicide.
The Spartan sword was made with steel crafted from the Twin Towers in New York City, honoring veterans and first responders alike.
That is a symbol of what our country went through 25 years ago. And it means a lot to me as a veteran, because I had to respond. I had to go to Afghanistan after 9/11. The firefighters, all the ambulance drivers and the police officers, they rushed into those Twin Towers that day. The Spartan Pledge is not only for veterans but first responders, because on that day they were the warriors that were going in trying to save the people.
As we celebrate veterans on this wonderful day, we give thanks to all of the veterans who gave their sacrifice so that we can enjoy our freedoms here in USA. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And next, a call to remember, November 7th marked the National Day for the Victims of Communism. In Atlanta, Georgia, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation held its Roll Call of Nations ceremony to honor more than 100 million victims of communist regimes worldwide. Let's take a look.
November 7th is National Day for the Victims of Communism. It marks the date of the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, which initiated the spread of communist regimes. On the 108th anniversary of that day, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation held its Roll Call of Nations ceremony in Atlanta, Georgia.
This event commemorates the real flesh and blood families, individuals, people murdered by communism in the past. And at the same token, we are bearing witness that the crimes of communism are not over. They happen in places like China and North Korea and Cuba to this very day.
The event honors over 100 million lives crushed by communist regimes worldwide, featuring speeches from survivors and descendants. Dr. Eric Patterson is the president and CEO of the foundation.
It uses its guns and tanks and walls to keep its own people in, to oppress its own people.
Jose Perez is a Cuban refugee and retired economist. He fled the country at age 12 in 1962. As a child, he witnessed televised execution under Fidel Castro's regime.
And he came in, Castro, and he said, that one should be guilty, that one is guilty. Then they set up kangaroo courts, and they condemned him, and they shot him. This little kid watched it on TV, and we saw these people just rolled over and fall dead. You go, that doesn't leave your mind as a young man.
Perez served on the Board of Regents for the University System of Georgia. He advocated for the state to establish a curriculum that teaches about communism's evils at the state level, which has now been implemented. Dr. Patterson also addressed the brutal persecution against Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa. The spiritual group is under severe repression by the communist regime in China.
It's been 26 years now since the terrible repression began in 1999 against Falun Dafa. And this is one of the most insidious recent persecutions, with the well-documented by our organization and others, organ harvesting, and many, many other crimes against those people.
Andrea Lauer Rice is the president of the Hungarian American Coalition. Her family was part of the 1956 Hungarian Revolution.
Every family member was involved in fighting for their freedom in some way.
She also says the recent New York City election presents an opportunity to teach young people more about communism.
Instead of just being horrified by the New York election results, we can look at it as an opportunity to teach the next generation that this ideology is an anathema to our American values.
Dr. Patterson said he hopes the event will raise awareness about the crimes of communism and help the next generation take a firm stand against today's communists.
Two top executives at the BBC quit yesterday following accusations of bias at the British broadcaster. One complaint involved a speech by President Trump in 2020. Here are the details.
Two top leaders of Britain's BBC resigned on Sunday amid allegations of bias at the broadcaster, including over the editing of a speech by President Donald Trump. Director General Tim Davie, the BBC's most senior executive, quit after an internal memo leaked by the Daily Telegraph newspaper had cited a string of failings. That included coverage of the Israel-Hamas war, trans issues, and edits of a speech made by Trump in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021. The BBC's flagship Panorama show was found, according to the memo, to have edited two parts of Trump's speech together, so that it appeared he had encouraged the Capitol riot later that day. That documentary showed this part of Trump's speech.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
But in the Panorama episode, "We're Going to Walk Down to the Capitol" was shown cut together with other parts of his speech, including close to its end, where Trump said, "We fight like hell." Davie has led the BBC since 2020. He said he decided to leave after, quote, reflecting on the very intense personal and professional demands of managing this role over many years in these febrile times. The CEO of BBC News, Deborah Turness, also resigned Sunday. In an email to staff, she said, quote, "I want to be absolutely clear, recent allegations that BBC News is institutionally biased are wrong." Trump welcomed the departures, criticizing the two as very dishonest people. The leaked internal report had also said BBC Arabic had showed anti-Israel bias in its reporting of the war on Gaza, and that stories which raised difficult questions around trans issues have been suppressed by a small group of staff.
BBC News CEO Deborah Turness was in London to hear her legal teams earlier today. She took questions from local media. Take a listen.
I stepped down over the weekend because the buck stops with me.
And if you'd excuse me,
why did you
I would
fail
like
to
just
deal
go
with the
in
mistakes that were made?
and see my teams. Thank you so much for being here.
Do you think that the journalists are corrupt like President Trump says? Do you think the journalists
Of course our journalists aren't corrupt. Our journalists are hard-working people who strive for impartiality, and I will stand by their journalism.
Is there institutional bias at the BBC?
There is no institutional bias. Mistakes are made, but there's no institutional bias.
But why weren't the mistakes dealt with on Trump, on anti-Semitism, on women's rights?
I'm sure that story will emerge, but for now I'm going to go in and see our team.
BBC Chair Samir Shah also apologized for an error of judgment in editing the Trump speech. Shah said the BBC had reviewed the footage and acknowledged it should have been clearer about changes made to the original remarks. Shah wrote to British lawmakers, quote, "It is absolutely clear the BBC must champion impartiality." Meanwhile, the BBC said today it had received a letter from President Trump threatening legal action. The broadcaster said it will respond in due course. Meanwhile, Taiwan's vice president delivered a historic address at the European Parliament over the weekend, calling for unity among democracies facing pressure from Beijing. Dozens of legislators attended the Interparliamentary Alliance on China Conference, or IPAC, to discuss how democratic governments should respond to Beijing's growing influence. U.S. lawmakers say the Chinese Communist Party is using trade and infrastructure vulnerabilities to influence U.S. policy. NTD international correspondent David Vivez reports from Brussels.
Are we seeing a new face of communism today? That was the opening question at this IPAC conference, and it set the tones for the debates as 50 legislators from 30 countries outlined the challenges their country faces from the Chinese Communist Party. The event was highlighted by the surprise visit of Taiwan's Vice President Hsiao Bi-khim. Attending IPAC's plenary session alongside Taiwan's foreign minister, her speech marked the first ever address by a senior member of the Taiwanese government in a major foreign democratic legislature.
And I stand here not only as a representative of a government, but as a voice for a society deeply committed to the same ideals that animate the parliaments of democracy around the world.
She urged that amid growing geopolitical tensions, 23 million Taiwanese people cannot be excluded from a conversation about protecting freedom, human dignity, and democracy in today's world. She said she hopes Taiwan will not only survive but continue to uphold democratic values alongside its allies.
We have already increased our national defense and also try to let the whole world know that actually the peace and security in Taiwan's Strait is not only for Taiwan's democracy, but also for the global economic prosperity. It's our shared interest and our shared value to maintain the peace and security in Taiwan's Strait.
According to Professor Akira Igata of Tokyo University, Taiwan produces 92% of the world's advanced semiconductor chips, meaning a major crisis there could trigger a multi-trillion-dollar global shock. In comparison, while the 2008 housing bubble cost the global economy around $2 trillion, Igata says a shipping disruption following a Chinese blockade could cost up to $10 trillion. Lawmakers also highlighted other forms of threats posed by the Chinese Communist Party. Nebraska State Senator Elliot Bostar shared concern about possible interference from the People's Republic of China.
Certainly, we're currently in the middle of a significant amount of economic pressures where through trade, leverage is being used across the Pacific to exercise certain political results. And so, of course, within that framework, real people get caught in the middle. And so if you're like me, you're from a place like Nebraska, global trade is incredibly important for the future of our state. And so it's important that we are resilient and that we are adequately preparing and also protecting ourselves from more direct threats, whether it's to our telecommunications infrastructure, our water infrastructure, and our power infrastructure. We've identified several vulnerabilities that are being actively exploited, being actively threatened by adversaries to the United States, including by the PRC.
In an interview with Epoch Times earlier this year, Michael Lucci, CEO and chairman of State Armor, said the Chinese Communist Party seeks to create internal crisis within the United States. He said the CCP targets critical infrastructure such as power, wastewater treatment, and telecommunications systems. Bostard also warned that the CCP might attempt to influence domestic policies contrary to the interest of U.S. citizens.
We understand that when someone comes to us and asks for a certain deal to be made, a certain law to be passed, certain policy to be implemented, that we know whether or not the root of that request is coming from an adversary to the United States.
He added that while the federal administration is addressing these issues, local governments often lack the resources and authority to respond effectively.
True. There is extraordinary vulnerability within local governments, especially in the U.S., where state and local governments have such a high degree of authority and responsibility and jurisdiction over a significant amount of the total governing that goes on in the United States. And so we can now no longer just rely on what the federal government does. And we must step up at the state level, at the subnational level, and take on national security as a critical component of the work that we're doing.
David Vives, NTD News, Brussels.
I'm Stephanie Cox, and this is World Watch. More alleged drug boat strikes. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says 2 lethal strikes were carried out yesterday on vessels operated by designated terrorist organizations. Hegseth says the 2 vessels were known by intelligence agencies to be associated with illicit narcotics smuggling. The War Secretary added they were carrying narcotics and were traveling to a known narco-trafficking route in the Eastern Pacific. Both strikes were conducted in international waters. 3 male alleged drug traffickers were aboard each vessel. All 6 were killed. The UN Human Rights Chief has called U.S. strikes on alleged drug dealers a violation of international human rights law. And U.S. officials are in Jerusalem today to discuss the current ceasefire agreement. The first stage of the U.S. brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas terrorists is nearing its end. Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are now working on implementing a government body for Gaza and deploying an international stabilization force. Kushner is a close advisor to his father-in-law, President Trump. He was a key architect of Washington's 20-point plan to wind down the fighting in the Middle East. A Paris court has granted former French President Nicolas Sarkozy early release from jail pending an appeal. It comes just 3 weeks after he started a 5-year sentence. The former president was charged with conspiring to raise campaign funds from Libya. A court found him guilty of attempting to secure funds for his 2007 presidential campaign from late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Sarkozy was president of France from 2007 to 2012. The trial to appeal his conviction is set for March. Sarkozy has consistently denied wrongdoing, calling himself a victim of revenge and hatred. Lights went out while Ukraine's President Zelenskyy was talking to a journalist during an interview in Kyiv. Take a look.
So we've seen some crazy stuff in the last couple of months. Russian. Oh, hello.
Hard times. Electricity.
Electricity is gone.
You know, not everything.
Okay, good. Oh my God.
We're switching to generator right now.
Zelenskyy said today that he wants to order 25 Patriot air defense systems from the United States. He acknowledged that the Patriot systems are expensive and that such a large batch could take years to manufacture. But he said European countries could give their Patriots to Ukraine and wait for replacements, stressing that they don't want to wait. Combined missile and drone strikes on the power grid have coincided with Ukraine's efforts to hold back a Russian battlefield push. The Russians are striving to capture the eastern stronghold of Pokrovsk. And the Kremlin today said it was actively preparing for President Putin to visit India before the end of the year. The Kremlin says Putin is due to visit India in December. He last went there in December 2021, just a few months before ordering troops into Ukraine in February 2022. President Trump has repeatedly called on India to stop buying oil from Russia. India is one of the biggest purchasers of Russian oil. And now for your sports news. We are joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, so much going on in sports right now. But let's start with baseball. There have been some allegations made regarding the Cleveland Guardians. Walk us through it because it's a little shocking.
Yes, we've got a couple of pitchers for the Cleveland Guardians who've been charged with fraud, conspiracy, and bribery. This is an alleged scheme to rig individual pitches to win money for gamblers. If that sounds familiar, it's because the NBA had a very similar case last month. We were just talking about this a few weeks ago. Now, in this case, federal prosecutors are alleging that Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz arranged with bettors to throw certain pitches for balls, outside the strike zone, so that the gambler could place prop bets and win on them. Prop bets are individual pitching bets or individual play bets or whatever, not team bets, So according to the indictment, this started in May 2023 with Clase and then June 2025 with Ortiz. The bettors won nearly $500,000. Players then received kickbacks. Now these two are already on baseball's non-disciplinary paid leave this past summer after betting firms flagged unusual betting activities on a couple of Ortiz's pitches. So this wasn't a total surprise. But if convicted on everything, the two could face maximum penalties of 65 years in federal prison. Wow. Now, both players, though, have denied the charges via statements from their lawyers. Now, even if the feds, though, are unable to get a conviction, and who knows what will happen, baseball themselves, they will look at the evidence and decide for themselves. If they think they are guilty, they could face a permanent ban from the league. I mean, this has happened several times before. Pete Rose's most famous case, but anyway, Clase in particular, this guy's a three-time All-Star. He's one of the best relievers in the game. So it's a very serious case.
That would be quite a loss. But so the league can make its own decision without any legal consequences. It can go ahead and.
I mean, they don't put anybody in prison. They just they make their own decision on if they think someone is betting or betting against their own team in a way.
They don't need proof. Like they don't need to.
Well, they don't have to. They're not going to have a day in court, really, unless Pete Rose. I don't know if he took his case to court, but yeah, they're independent, of course, from the federal investigators. But the federal investigators, of course, have way more power to do this full investigation. So I'm thinking they're going to take a look at what they turn up and decide for themselves whether they're guilty or innocent.
Okay. You'll be keeping us updated,
I will be keeping you updated, for sure.
Okay, elsewhere in the game, a pair of Japanese baseball stars may be heading to Major League Baseball.
Yes, Japanese pitcher Tetsuya Imai will soon be a free agent this season after the Seibu Lions said they'd begin the process of making him available. It's called posting. Now, the 27-year-old had a 10-5 record last year for his Japan team, ERA 1.92. He's a right-hander with a very good fastball, apparently. Now, also, Japanese third baseman Manutaka Murakami reportedly, anyway, already started the posting process on Friday. He's a 25-year-old who broke the single-season home run record in Japan. He had 56 in 2022, so he was just 22 back then. Now, players from Japan's leagues have 45 days then to reach an agreement with the Major League Baseball team after being posted. Now, the former Japanese team then gets a percentage of whatever huge contract that they would presumably sign. I'm not sure how much these two would get. They look like they're pretty good. But this has become a pretty big deal after the success of Shohei Ohtani. But even also, there's some other Japanese stars in baseball. You got Yoshinobu Yamamoto of the Dodgers. He was just named World Series MVP.
Yeah,
big names. So
some talent there and a big love of baseball, right?
They certainly do.
Okay, shifting gears to the NFL, we had a full slate of games yesterday, including one with President Trump in attendance. What stood out to you?
Yeah, Trump saw quite a performance by the Detroit Lions there in Washington, D.C. Now, a week after the Lions' home loss to Minnesota, Dan Campbell, head coach, took over the play-calling duties. Lions went on to gain a season-high 546 yards in offense. They beat the Commanders 44-22. Now, meanwhile, in Seattle, DeMarcus Lawrence had quite a game for the Seahawks, scoring a pair of touchdowns. Now, that's a very good day for an offensive player.
Okay.
But DeMarcus Lawrence is a defensive player. He's an outside linebacker. He returned a pair of fumble recoveries for touchdowns. Just the fourth defensive player in NFL history. I mean, this goes back, 75 years. I mean, to have more than one in a game. Seahawks beat the Cardinals, the same score, 44-22. How about that? And then in New Jersey, really, the New York Jets beat the Cleveland Browns 27-20 for their second win of the season and second win in a row. Now, they got return touchdowns of a kickoff return and a punt return in the first quarter that helped aid them to victory. So that's what stood out to me.
As you said, plenty going on right now, as I said.
Yeah.
And as you had me say, plenty going on in sports. All right, we'll look forward to the next update. Thanks, Dave. And we'll be covering more news right after this break. Stay tuned for that.